All right. Welcome to the Church of Jesus Christ. Welcome to what then became the Tuesday Nighters. Welcome to what then became the book club. That's 118 weeks together as just the book club. And welcome to what has become the suggestion box. All of these subsets under the Church of Jesus Christ. And the suggestion box is now running 44 weeks. I find that extraordinary. So if you do your math on this, you realize we're just 2 months away from being a full year in the suggestion box, and we're not close to being done. It may be that we run with a suggestion box for the rest of time. So having said that, please again, I solicit your input and your suggestions for chapters to study on our Tuesday nights. They've been wonderful, wonderful suggestions. So I'd ask you to keep praying and keep those coming to us. Let's get started. Again, this is week 44, and we're in Romans 6. Romans 6 is one chapter, 23 verses, 484 words. But watch this. How long do you think it takes to read through Romans 6? I'm not trying to take anyone's accomplishment away, and it almost sounds like I'm doing that, but I'm not, because I was stunned at this. First, I want to say that we don't read a chapter like I listened to this chapter probably 10 times tonight as I was preparing. I put it on YouTube and let the King James Version just continue to read to me. It is 3 minutes and anywhere between 11 and 30 seconds long to read it. But again, I don't think anyone just reads through. It's very sterile to do that. So even as it did, I wanted to pause it and sit on a verse or two as as you probably read these. But isn't that amazing when you think it only takes 3.5 minutes to read this straight through? Okay, let's get going. Romans 6 is not as it appears. Okay, it's not merely a standalone chapter. I do not believe that. Instead, at least to me, it's clearly Romans 5, part 2. In fact, if you think this through and look at Romans 6 and look at it next to Romans 5, Romans 6 first verse is a direct reply to Romans 5's last two verses, 21 and 22. So it flows from one to the other, could easily have been a combined 44 verses, but instead it is 21 verses and 23 verses of two different chapters. Making this even more intricate, if you will, the reply isn't even a statement in verse 1. It's actually two distinct, maybe tied, but two distinct questions. Okay, so both chapters are clearly about getting answers. They are supplying and providing answers, hopefully to your questions as well, but certainly to those questions that Paul asks and then answers. The questions he answers are really difficult to digest because you almost have to unlearn what you've already learned by way of life, by way of a lot of things, but they're hard to digest. The first question is not asked as an example. His first question, Romans 6:1, is not asked sincerely. What then? He starts out. What shall we say then? And we find out it's actually somewhat sarcastically insincere. And its intention seems focused on taking advantage, or those taking advantage of what might be seen as man's loophole, a man-made loophole, an assumed loophole, if you will. Again, based on what? Based on the entire premise of Romans 5, which is in short form, God's gift of grace. God's gift of grace is not easy to understand because it's so full, so complete, so unquestionable that it seems questionable. So as Paul taught and espouse grace to what I would believe are new converts, as the city of Rome was a new undertaking. So as he espoused grace to these new converts and maybe even the unbelievers amongst, he must have heard this undertone of this loophole. And what I mean by that is the theory of grace might be seen as dangerous, interpreted as dangerous to anyone battling sin daily. So Romans 6 becomes the carry through or the expansion of Romans 5's details on how this whole grace works together. How does this grace thing really make sense? Because it goes against every other facet of our life. Romans 6 is full of life lessons. I hope you found at least some of those, if not all of those. And they focus on the how-to grace and forgiveness works. At least God's grace and God's forgiveness, not our own. Example, Paul uses, as he often does, visuals. I love to listen to Brother Ken talk. I hope that I sometimes capture this as well. When someone speaks in visuals, it is intended to make it easier to understand, make it easier to personalize. So Paul teaches our own baptisms are based upon Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. I believe I just talked about this on Sunday or the Sunday before. Death being that we lay someone down into the water, going hands back into the water and bring them out of the water. Death and resurrection. So he doesn't give that description, but talks about our baptism being analogous to Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. What Paul is doing is providing, in my terms, guide rails to help direct, I call the followers, wandering followers, because all of us are going through this for the first time. So each of us on our own path, trying to follow the steps of Jesus Christ, but taking our own steps. So if you ever go bowling and they put the rails on the alleys, that's what Paul's words are doing for us, keeping us in the alley, keeping us on the straight and narrow path. And he does it by way of these beautiful explanations. In the middle of this chapter, he disempowers sin, knowing that sin is our most powerful battle. So he uses phrases like dead to sin. He uses phrases like don't let sin reign over you. He suggests that we not yield to sin and more, much more than that. But those are a couple examples. I didn't want to do too much of the verses specifically so that you can bring those to us. In short form, what Paul is saying is you're safe. You cannot out-sin grace. Remember what it said in Romans 5, where sin abounds, there doth grace abound even more. You cannot out-sin grace. But then this entire chapter 6 says, don't sin, don't sin. In spite of this quote-unquote loophole, don't sin. Said even differently, what he's capturing is the essence of our walk with the Lord. In a spiritual world, living in a natural world, walking in a spiritual world, there's that push-pull of our lives every single day. Every single day, unlearning and relearning, unlearning and relearning. We keep pushing and pulling. Foolish Galatians, who doth bewitch you? Why do you keep stepping back? Stay on the straight and narrow. That's what Paul's trying to help us with these safety rails. Another way to say it even more. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you can do it. Or in other words, don't do it. But you can, because the grace will forgive the sin, but don't do it. Don't not do it. Hear this now. Don't not do it out of a fear of God's ultimate punishment, keeping you out of heaven. This great punishment of if you keep making these mistakes, you're going to lose your soul. That's not why we obey God. We obey him as our love letter back to him. We obey him to somehow express this blank check of forgiveness that he wrote to us, knowing that we have a propensity to sin, yet he said, I will forgive you. So the weight that we carry is not a fear that God is going to throw us out, but instead it's how do I ever thank him for such goodness? I can't sin at all, not out of fear. And by the way, fear God in every sense of the word, but this fear of that I'm not going to make it to heaven keeps the focus all on ourselves. And he doesn't want us to do that. He wants us to understand where sin does abound in your life, my grace abounds even more. So you are forgiven in advance. What are you going to do with that knowledge is what 6 is explaining. Love your way to the Lord. Don't tremble with fear. Tremble with fear that your actions might keep someone else out of heaven. Tremble with fear that your actions might offend the babes that you come among in your life. That's the fear that I want you to embrace. But we have to get our focus where it needs to be, on God and on others. So this fear for self is a waste of emotion, because he is saying, I have you. So what Romans 6 lays out in shortest form possible is a choice. It ends. If you go to the end of 6, you're going to read this verse. The wages of sin is death. The gift of God is eternal life. You have one or you have the other. So I will finish with this. Don't just choose ye this day whom you will serve. Choose every single moment of your life who you will serve. Serve Jesus Christ with love, with appreciation, and with a fear that you might offend him on some level, or equally harmful, you might offend someone else to the point that they turn away from Jesus Christ when you have been sent in their lives to be the conduit to Jesus Christ.